The unexpected proposal. Jake wiped his forehead with the back of his hand as he stepped out of the cramped maintenance shaft. The air on the space station's lower levels always felt stale, and after hours of repairing a broken coolant pipe, he was drenched in sweat. His tool belt felt heavier than usual, and all he wanted now was a long, hot shower to wash off the grime. As he packed up his tools, Syra appeared. Her tall, graceful form cast a shadow in the dimly lit corridor. She was a member of the Aquirans, an aquatic alien species known for their shimmering, water-like skin that glowed faintly in the dark. Jake had worked with her before, and while she was polite and professional, he couldn't claim to understand her entirely. Aquirans had their own ways, their own customs, and sometimes those customs could be peculiar. "You look tired, Jake," Syra said, her voice calm and melodic. Her large, reflective eyes studied him with an intensity that always made him a little uneasy. "Yeah, this coolant pipe had more leaks than a bucket shot full of holes," Jake replied, forcing a smile. "Could use a shower before I collapse." Syra tilted her head slightly, her glowing skin rippling in patterns that Jake had learned indicated she was thinking. "A shower. That is convenient." Jake blinked. "Convenient? How?" "Because I will join you," Syra said matter-of-factly. The wrench Jake was holding clattered to the floor. "What?" Syra's expression remained neutral, as if she hadn't just suggested something completely outrageous. "It's customary among my people. After a long task, we share a water ritual to relax and strengthen trust. Your species refers to it as showering, correct?" Jake stared at her, his mind racing. He wanted to believe he'd misheard, but her calm demeanor suggested otherwise. "Wait, you want to share a shower? Like, together?" "Yes," Syra said, her tone as casual as if she asked him to pass the salt at dinner. "It's just custom." Jake's mouth opened and closed as he struggled to find words. The idea of showering with anyone, let alone an alien colleague, felt way too intimate. But Syra didn't seem to think so. To her, it was just a custom. Was it really a big deal, or was he overthinking it? "I'm not sure that's a good idea," Jake finally managed to say, his voice faltering. Syra stepped closer, her reflective eyes narrowing slightly. "Do you not trust me?" "It's not about trust," Jake said quickly. "It's just, humans don't usually shower together unless they're very close." "Ah," Syra said, nodding slowly. "Your species has different boundaries, I understand." But her glowing skin dimmed slightly, and Jake recognized the gesture as one of disappointment. For a moment, guilt twisted in his chest. Was he being disrespectful to her culture? Syra wasn't trying to make things awkward, at least he didn't think she was. Maybe to her, this was as normal as shaking hands. But to him, it felt like crossing a line he wasn't sure he was ready to cross. "Why is this so important to you?" Jake asked cautiously. Syra looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "Among my kind, water rituals are sacred. They signify trust, cooperation, and unity. Sharing one with you would show that I value our partnership." She paused, her glowing skin rippling again. "But I see that your discomfort outweighs this gesture. I do not wish to force you." Her words carried no malice, but Jake felt the weight of them all the same. She had said it so plainly, yet he couldn't shake the feeling there was more to her request. Something deeper. Was it truly just a cultural difference, or was she testing him in some way? "I'll think about it," Jake said, hoping to buy himself time. Syra inclined her head. "Very well. I will wait for your decision." With that, she turned and walked away, her glowing form fading into the shadows of the corridor. Jake sighed and leaned against the wall, running a hand through his hair. What had he gotten himself into? Sharing a shower with an alien wasn't exactly on his bucket list, but neither was offending a colleague, or worse, creating some kind of diplomatic incident. As he stood there, staring at the tools scattered on the floor, a nagging thought crept into his mind. What if Tyra's request wasn't just about culture? What if there was something she wasn't telling him? The question lingered, pulling at his thoughts and leaving him with an uneasy feeling. For now, though, he'd have to figure out what to do, and fast. Because if Tyra was serious, this custom was only the beginning. The suspense of what might come next made his pulse quicken. One thing was certain: life aboard this space station was never boring. Cultural confusion. Jake spent the rest of the day trying to shake off the strange conversation with Tyra, but her words lingered in his mind. The idea of sharing a shower with her was unsettling, sure, but it was the reasoning behind it that truly baffled him. Was this really just a harmless cultural tradition, or was there something else at play? The station's mess hall was buzzing with activity as Jake grabbed a tray of food and found a quiet corner to sit. His mind kept replaying Tyra's calm expression as she explained the so-called custom. Trust, cooperation, unity. It all sounded so formal, almost ceremonial. But why involve him? They weren't close, not by human standards, and certainly not by Aquiran ones, at least as far as he understood them. Lost in thought again, a familiar voice broke through his reverie. Jake looked up to see Tasha, another human engineer, sitting down across from him. She had a knack for reading people and an uncanny ability to pry into their problems. "Hey, Tasha," Jake said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about something." Tasha raised an eyebrow. "You've got that look, the one you get when you're overthinking. Spill it." Jake hesitated, unsure how to explain without sounding ridiculous. Finally, he sighed. "Okay, so Tyra asked me to share a shower with her." Tasha choked on her drink. "She what?" "Sha," Jake hissed, glancing around to make sure no one else heard. "She said it's some kind of custom for her people, something about bonding and trust." Tasha's laughter died down, replaced by a look of mild concern. "Wait, she was serious." "Dead serious," Jake said, leaning forward. "And she looked disappointed when I hesitated. Now I'm stuck wondering if I offended her or if I'm just overreacting." Tasha leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Well, Aquarians do have some weird traditions. Remember when one of them tried to gift the captain a live eel as a thank you?" Jake groaned. "Yeah, but this feels different. She made it sound like this was a big deal. Like it's not just a shower. It's symbolic or something." Tasha tapped her chin thoughtfully. "Did she explain what happens if you say no? Is it like a major insult, or just mildly awkward?" "She didn't say, but the way she looked at me, I don't know." "It felt important," Jake admitted. Tasha nodded slowly. "Look, if it's that big of a deal to her, maybe you should ask her more about it. Get the full story before deciding. Worst case, you learn something about her culture. Best case, you don't accidentally cause a diplomatic incident." Jake sighed. "You're probably right, but how do I even start that conversation without making it more awkward?" "Simple," Tasha said, smirking. "Just ask her why she's so eager to shower with you, but maybe phrase it better." Jake rolled his eyes but couldn't help chuckling. "Thanks, Tasha. You're a real help." "Anytime," she said, grabbing her tray and standing up. "Good luck, Jake. Sounds like you're going to need it." That evening, Jake found himself outside Tyra's quarters, hesitating before pressing the door chime. He had rehearsed what he wanted to say, but his nerves were getting the better of him. Taking a deep breath, he pressed the button. The door slid open, and Tyra stood there, her shimmering skin reflecting the soft light from her room. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes brightened slightly when she saw him. "Jake," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "I did not expect you. Is everything all right?" "Yeah, everything's fine," Jake said quickly, stepping into the room. It was humid and dimly lit, with a small pool of water in one corner, a necessity for Aquarians to stay comfortable. "I just wanted to talk about earlier." Tyra gestured for him to sit on a low bench near the pool. "You are still troubled by my request," she said, sitting gracefully across from him. "It's not that I'm troubled," Jake said carefully. "I just don't fully understand it. You said it's a custom, but it feels like there's more to it. Why me? Why now?" Hijera tilted her head, her reflective eyes studying him. "Among my kind, water rituals are not offered lightly. They signify a willingness to trust and rely on one another. You have proven yourself reliable, and I wish to strengthen that bond." Jake frowned. "But why does it have to be a shower? Humans don't usually do things like that." Zyra's glowing skin rippled faintly, a sign of amusement. "For Aquirans, water is life. Sharing it is the most intimate gesture of trust we can offer. I did not realize it would make you so uncomfortable. Perhaps I misunderstood your kind." "It's not that," Jake said quickly. "It's just different for humans. We're not used to that level of, closeness with people we're not, romantically involved with." Zyra nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "I see. I did not consider how our customs might conflict. I only wish to honor our partnership." Jake felt a pang of guilt. She wasn't trying to make things awkward. She was trying to show respect. "I appreciate that, Zyra. Really. But maybe there's another way we can strengthen our trust. Something that works for both of us." Zyra's eyes glimmered with curiosity. "Such as?" Jake hesitated, then smiled. "I don't know yet, but I'll think of something. In the meantime, let's just keep working together. Trust builds over time, right?" Zyra smiled faintly, her glowing skin rippling again. "Indeed. Thank you, Jake. Your honesty is refreshing." As Jake left her quarters, he felt a strange mix of relief and curiosity. Zyra's customs might be unusual, but they came from a place of sincerity. And as much as he wanted to avoid another awkward conversation, he couldn't shake the feeling that their partnership was only beginning to reveal its true depths. The shower dilemma. The next day, Jake was back in the cramped, dimly lit corridors of the station, trying to focus on repairing another broken system. The hum of the station's life support engines filled the silence, but his mind was somewhere else, specifically replaying his conversation with Zyra. Her calm yet sincere explanation about the significance of water rituals had left him questioning not just her culture, but also his own reactions. Was he being too rigid? Or was this custom truly as innocent as she claimed? His distraction was obvious as he fumbled and dropped a wrench for the third time. "Focus, Jake," he muttered to himself. But it was no use. Zyra's words, her glowing expression, and her unshakable composure kept intruding on his thoughts. After finishing the repairs, he made his way to the station's communal showers. These were nothing luxurious, just a row of compact stalls designed for practicality rather than comfort. Jake tossed his toolkit into a locker and grabbed a clean towel. As he reached for the controls, he heard a soft, familiar voice behind him. "Jake." He spun around, startled, to find Zyra standing in the doorway. Her shimmering skin reflected the harsh fluorescent lights, giving her an almost ethereal glow. She looked more serious than usual, her reflective eyes locked onto his. "Zyra," Jake stammered, gripping the towel like a lifeline. "What are you doing here?" She stepped inside, her movements graceful and deliberate. "I came to offer my assistance. You said you would consider my request, but I sense you are still uncertain." Jake blinked, trying to process her words. "You followed me here." "I did not wish to impose," she said, her tone calm but firm. "But I sensed hesitation in your voice yesterday. I thought perhaps I could help ease your discomfort by explaining more." "Explaining more?" Jake repeated, his heart racing. The confined space of the shower area suddenly felt much smaller. Zyra nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Among my people, water is not just a physical necessity. It is a source of connection, a way to cleanse both the body and the mind. When we share it, we share trust, understanding, and unity. It is a gesture that carries no hidden motives, only sincerity. Jake ran a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of her words. Look, I get that it's important to you. But for humans, sharing a shower is, well, it's private. It's not something we do with just anyone. Why is that? Kyra asked, tilting her head in that curious way of hers. Is it because you fear vulnerability? Jake opened his mouth to argue, then hesitated. Was that it? Was he afraid of being vulnerable, of stepping outside his comfort zone? The thought unsettled him. It's not fear, he said finally. It's just different. Our cultures see these things differently. Zara studied him for a moment, her glowing skin rippling faintly. Perhaps, but sometimes understanding requires stepping beyond what is comfortable. That is why I ask this of you, not to impose, but to invite you into a deeper bond of trust. Jake couldn't deny that her words carried weight. Still, the idea of sharing a shower with her felt like crossing a line he wasn't sure he was ready to cross. And if I say no? He asked cautiously. Zara's expression softened. Then I will respect your choice. Trust cannot be forced. It must be given freely. But know that my offer stands, whenever you are ready. Her calm acceptance caught Jake off guard. He had expected her to push harder, to insist that he honor her customs. Instead, she left the decision entirely in his hands. It was both a relief and a burden. Before he could respond, Zara turned to leave. Take your time, Jake. I will not disturb you further. As she walked away, Jake felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, guilt, and something else he couldn't quite name. He leaned against the wall, staring at the empty doorway. Zara's words echoed in his mind. Understanding requires stepping beyond what is comfortable. Was he overthinking this? Was his hesitation rooted in cultural differences, or was he just afraid of being vulnerable? The more he thought about it, the less certain he became. All he knew was that Zara wasn't like anyone he'd ever met, human or otherwise. And maybe, just maybe, her offer wasn't as strange as it seemed. With a deep breath, Jake stepped into the shower stall and turned on the water. As the warm spray washed over him, he couldn't help but wonder what he'd do if Zara asked again. Would he be ready to step beyond his comfort zone, or would he let fear hold him back? The question lingered, unanswered, as the steam rose around him. An unexpected vulnerability. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Zara's request had more layers than she was letting on. Over the next few days, he noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. Normally composed and confident, Zara now seemed distracted during their work shifts. Her shimmering skin, which usually rippled in calm, hypnotic patterns, occasionally flickered erratically, a sign of unease among her kind. It was as if she was carrying a weight she couldn't share. The two of them were assigned to a routine inspection of the station's hydroponic gardens, an area filled with lush greenery and trickling water that mimicked natural Earth-like environments. Jake had always found the gardens soothing, but today, the silence between him and Zara felt heavy. Finally, he broke the tension. You've been quiet lately. Is everything okay? Zara paused, her delicate hands brushing against the leaves of a water fern. She didn't look at him as she spoke. I have been reflecting. About the shower thing, Jake guessed, trying to keep his tone light. Zara turned to him, her large, reflective eyes meeting his. Yes, but it is not just that. She hesitated, as if searching for the right words. There is something I have not told you, Jake, something about why I made that request. Jake frowned, leaning against a nearby railing. I figured there was more to it. What's going on? Zara's glowing skin dimmed, the shimmering pattern slowing to a subdued pulse. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked vulnerable. Among my people, water rituals are sacred, as I told you. But they are also rare. We do not share them often, even among our own kind. Jake tilted his head, confused. Then why did you ask me? I'm not Aquiran. I don't even fully understand the ritual. That is precisely why it is significant, Zara said softly. You are different. Your kind is different. Humans possess qualities my people admire, but cannot easily understand. Resilience, adaptability, courage. By sharing the ritual with you, I hope to understand those qualities better. And I hope to share something of myself in return. Her admission caught Jake off guard. He had always seen Syra as poised and confident, almost untouchable. Now she seemed unsure, even a little afraid. "So this isn't just about trust," he said slowly. "It's about connection." "Yes," Syra admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have spent much time among your kind, but I often feel like an outsider. You, Jake, are the first human who has made me feel welcome." Jake didn't know how to respond to that. He had always thought of Syra as part of the crew, just another colleague. But now he realized she had been quietly observing him, seeking something he hadn't known he was offering. "Why me?" he asked, genuinely curious. Syra hesitated, then said, "You are honest. Even when you are uncertain, you do not hide it. That is rare among both our species." Jake felt a twinge of guilt. He had been so caught up in his own discomfort that he hadn't considered what the request might mean to her. "I guess I never thought about how hard it must be for you to live here, surrounded by people who don't understand your ways." Syra gave a faint smile. "It is not easy, but it is worthwhile. Your kind teaches me much, and I hope I can offer something in return." They stood in silence for a moment, the gentle sound of water trickling through the hydroponic system filling the space. Jake's mind raced with thoughts. He still wasn't sure if he was ready to accept her offer, but he was beginning to understand why she had made it. It wasn't just about a ritual. It was about bridging the gap between their worlds. Finally, Jake spoke. "I'm not saying I get all of this yet, but I'll try. I'll try to understand." Syra's skin rippled faintly, her glow brightening. "That is all I can ask, Jake. Thank you." As they finished their inspection and left the gardens, Jake felt a strange sense of clarity. Syra's vulnerability had shown him a side of her he hadn't expected, and it made him question his own assumptions. Maybe the custom wasn't just a test of trust. It was an opportunity to grow, to see the universe from a perspective he'd never considered before. For the first time, Jake found himself wondering if stepping outside his comfort zone might be worth it. Syra's trust wasn't just a gesture. It was a gift. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready to accept it. A hidden threat. The station's calm routine shattered later that evening when the alarms blared through the corridors. Jake was in the engineering bay, checking diagnostics on the life support systems, when the emergency lights flickered red, casting long, ominous shadows. The station's automated voice droned a chilling message. "Warning. Unauthorized breach detected. All personnel proceed to secure zones immediately." Jake's heart raced as he grabbed a comm device and contacted Tasha. "What the hell's going on?" Tasha's voice crackled through the static. "Unknown vessel docked without authorization. Security's scrambling to figure out if it's pirates, scavengers, or something worse. Where are you?" "Engineering. I'll head to the secure zone," Jake said, already moving toward the nearest bulkhead door. The station's layout was a maze of tight corridors and maintenance shafts, and Jake knew them well. But the eerie silence, punctuated only by the occasional hiss of decompressing air, made even familiar paths feel treacherous. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. As he turned a corner, he nearly collided with Syra. Her glowing skin flickered erratically, a stark contrast to her usual calm. "Syra, what are you doing here? You should be in a secure zone." "I was coming to find you," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Your location was closest to the breach point." Jake frowned. "Closest? You think they're coming here?" Syra nodded grimly. "The intruders appear to be targeting engineering. If they gain control of the systems, they could disable life support or power the weapons grid for themselves." Jake's stomach sank. Engineering was the station's heart. If the intruders got control, Everyone aboard would be at their mercy. We need to lock this place down. Can you help me? Of course, Zaira said, already scanning the control panel near the bulkhead. Her fingers moved quickly, her glowing patterns stabilizing as she focused. We must act quickly. They are not far. As they worked to override the bulkhead's security system, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Jake's pulse quickened. Whoever the intruders were, they weren't subtle. "Sarah, we need to hurry," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "I am almost finished," she replied, her voice calm but urgent. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by guttural voices speaking a language Jake didn't recognize. He clenched his fists, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. They were unarmed, outnumbered, and cornered in a critical part of the station. "Done," Zaira said, stepping back as the bulkhead door slid shut and locked with a loud clang. "That will slow them down, but it won't hold them indefinitely." Jake exhaled sharply. "Okay, what now?" Zaira looked at him, her expression unusually serious. "There is something I must tell you, Jake. It may change how you see me, but there is no time to delay." Jake blinked. "Now." "Zaira, we're in the middle of." "Listen to me," she interrupted, stepping closer. Her glowing skin dimmed as she spoke, her voice carrying a weight he hadn't heard before. "I have not been entirely truthful about my purpose here." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, his voice low and tense. "I was sent here by my people to observe and report on humans," Zaira admitted. "We have been cautious about your kind, unsure if you can be trusted. My role was to determine whether you were a threat to us." Jake stared at her, his mind reeling. "So, this whole time, you've been spying on us?" "Not spying," Zaira said quickly. "Learning, understanding. But during my time here, I discovered something unexpected." She met his gaze, her reflective eyes filled with sincerity. "Humans are not the threat we feared. You are stronger, braver, and more compassionate than we imagined. That is why I chose to bond with you, Jake. Not out of duty, but because I believe in you." Jake didn't know what to say. The revelation left him stunned, but there was no time to process it. The pounding on the bulkhead door snapped him back to the present. "Whatever your reasons, we need to focus on surviving this," Jake said, his voice firm. "Can you use your tech to give us an edge?" Zaira nodded, her glow brightening slightly. "I have tools that may help, but we must work together." As they prepared for the inevitable confrontation, Jake felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, and an odd sense of respect. Zaira's confession had shaken him, but her willingness to stand by him in the face of danger spoke volumes. The intruders were closing in, and the fate of the station hung in the balance. Jake tightened his grip on a makeshift weapon, a heavy wrench, while Zaira activated a small device that shimmered with Aquarian technology. "Ready?" she asked, her voice steady. Jake nodded, his heart pounding. "Let's do this." As the bulkhead door began to creak under the force of the intruders' attempts to breach it, Jake and Zaira stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. For the first time, he realized he wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for trust, for understanding, and for the fragile bond they had begun to build. Teamwork under pressure. The bulkhead door groaned loudly, each impact from the other side sending vibrations through the walls. Jake's knuckles whitened as he tightened his grip on the wrench, his heart pounding in rhythm with the relentless pounding. Beside him, Zaira remained calm, her glowing skin steady and her reflective eyes focused on the task at hand. "They're almost through," Jake muttered, glancing nervously at her. "Whatever you're planning, now's the time." Zaira nodded, activating a small cylindrical device she had pulled from her belt. The gadget emitted a faint hum, its surface shimmering with the same fluid glow as her skin. "This will release an electromagnetic pulse, temporarily disabling their weapons and communication systems. It will not harm them, but it will give us an advantage. Jake raised an eyebrow. You've been holding out on me. How many more tricks do you have up your sleeve? Zyra offered a faint smile. Enough to keep us alive. Trust me, Jake. The word trust hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Jake's doubts lingered in the back of his mind. Her recent confession still felt raw, but he had no choice but to rely on her now. Whatever her past motives, she was here, standing beside him, ready to fight for their survival. The bulkhead finally gave way, the door screeching open as a group of heavily armed figures stormed inside. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The intruders were humanoid, but wore imposing suits of armor, their faces obscured by helmets. They moved with precision, their weapons raised as they scanned the room. Zyra didn't wait. She pressed a button on the device, and the pulse burst outward in a ripple of invisible energy. The intruders' weapons sparked and went dark, their communication devices crackling uselessly. Confusion spread through their ranks, and Jake seized the moment. Now, Zyra shouted, grabbing Jake's arm and pulling him toward the control panel at the far end of the room. Jake sprinted alongside her, his heart racing as the intruders struggled to regroup. "What's the plan?" he asked, his voice strained as they reached the console. "We must initiate a lockdown," Zyra explained, her fingers flying over the controls. "If we can isolate this section of the station, we can trap them here and call for reinforcements." Jake nodded, stepping in to assist. The system was familiar to him, and together they worked quickly to seal off the area. But the intruders weren't idle. One of them managed to bypass the disabled weapon systems, pulling a blade from their armor and advancing toward the pair. "Zyra, watch out," Jake shouted, stepping in front of her and raising his wrench defensively. The armored figure lunged, the blade catching the light as it sliced toward him. Jake barely managed to deflect the blow, the impact sending shockwaves through his arms. He stumbled but held his ground, adrenaline surging through him. To his surprise, Zyra didn't retreat. Instead, she moved with surprising agility, her shimmering form darting around the intruder. With a fluid motion, she struck a vulnerable joint in the armor, causing the figure to stagger. Jake didn't hesitate, using the opening to knock the weapon from the intruder's grip. "Impressive," Jake said, panting as they subdued the attacker. Zyra straightened, her glow brightening slightly. "Acquirants are not as fragile as we appear." Another wave of intruders entered the room, their movements more coordinated despite their disabled weapons. Jake and Sarah exchanged a glance, silently agreeing that they couldn't afford to be overwhelmed. "I'll hold them off," Jake said, gripping his wrench tightly. "You finish the lockdown." "Jake," Zyra began, but he cut her off. "Just trust me, okay? Like I'm trusting you." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. "Do not take unnecessary risks." Jake smirked, positioning himself between the intruders and Zyra. No promises. As Zyra worked furiously at the console, Jake faced the oncoming attackers. He ducked and dodged their swings, using his knowledge of the station's layout to his advantage. He led them into tight spaces, forcing them to maneuver awkwardly in their bulky armor. Meanwhile, Zyra's hands moved with precision, her calm determination unwavering despite the chaos around her. "Lockdown initiated," she announced moments later. "We have them contained." Jake barely had time to react as a final attacker lunged at him. Before he could defend himself, Zyra appeared at his side, her movements swift and deliberate. With a calculated strike, she disarmed the intruder, sending them sprawling to the floor. Jake stared at her, catching his breath. "Remind me never to underestimate you." Zyra offered a faint smile, her glowing pattern steady once more. "And you remind me never to underestimate humans." With the lockdown in place, the remaining intruders were trapped, their escape routes sealed. Zyra sent out a distress signal to the station's security forces, who quickly arrived to secure the area and take the attackers into custody. As the adrenaline faded, Jake leaned against the wall, exhaustion washing over him. Tyra stood beside him, her expression unreadable. "You saved my life," Jake said after a moment. "You saved mine," Tyra replied, her tone soft. They stood in silence, the weight of their shared ordeal settling over them. For the first time, Jake felt a sense of true partnership with her, an unspoken bond forged in the heat of battle. Whatever doubts he had about her motives, they no longer seemed to matter. "Thanks, Tyra," Jake said finally, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "For everything." Tyra nodded, her reflective eyes meeting his. "It was an honor, Jake." For the first time, Jake believed her, fully and completely. A new understanding. The station's emergency lights dimmed as the situation finally came under control. The intruders had been subdued and secured, their weapons confiscated and their leader taken into custody. Jake sat on the floor of the engineering bay, his back resting against the cool metal wall. His body ached from the struggle, and his knuckles were scraped raw from wielding the wrench as a makeshift weapon. Tyra stood nearby, her shimmering skin glowing faintly in the subdued lighting. Her reflective eyes scanned the room, her expression unreadable. For the first time since the ordeal began, Jake had the chance to truly process everything that had happened, and everything he had learned about her. "You okay?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence. Tyra turned to him, her glow pulsing softly. "I am unharmed. And you?" Jake held up his bruised hands and gave a wry smile. "Could be worse. I think my ego's more bruised than anything else." Sarah tilted her head, a gesture he'd come to recognize as amusement. "You fought well, Jake. Your bravery is remarkable." "Bravery?" Jake laughed lightly. "I was just trying not to get killed." "Bravery is not the absence of fear," Sarah said, stepping closer. "It is acting despite it. And you did so not just for yourself, but for others. That is what makes your kind extraordinary." Jake met her gaze, the sincerity in her words catching him off guard. "You really believe that, don't you?" "Yes," Tyra said simply. She paused, as if weighing her next words carefully. "When I first came here, I viewed humans with suspicion. My people feared what your kind might become, your power, your unpredictability. I was sent to observe, to judge. But you have changed my perspective." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Me?" Tyra nodded. "You embody what is best about humanity, your willingness to protect, to adapt, to trust. You have shown me that our fears were misplaced." Jake wasn't sure how to respond. He had spent most of his life feeling like just another cog in the machine, an engineer doing his job to keep the station running. Hearing Tyra's words made him feel significant in a way he hadn't expected. "So," Jake began, shifting uncomfortably, "what happens now? Are you going to report back to your people that we're not so bad after all?" Tyra's glow brightened slightly. "Yes. But I will also tell them that I have chosen to stay." Jake blinked. "Stay? Here? Why?" "Because I have found a place among your kind," Tyra said, her tone soft but firm. "And because I wish to continue learning from you." She hesitated, then added, "If you will have me." Jake chuckled, shaking his head. "After everything we've been through, Tyra, I'd say you've more than earned your place here." Tyra's glow rippled faintly, a sign of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Jake. Your acceptance means more than you know." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of their shared experiences settling between them. Finally, Jake broke the quiet with a smile. "You know, about that shower thing." Tyra raised an eyebrow, her glowing patterns shifting subtly. "Yes." Jake rubbed the back of his neck, feeling a bit sheepish. "Maybe I overreacted. I still don't fully get your customs, but I think I'm starting to understand the spirit behind them. It's not about the act itself. It's about trust, right?" "Yes," Tyra said, her voice carrying a note of warmth. "It is about trust, connection, and understanding." Jake nodded slowly. "Well, If that's what it's about, I guess I'm willing to give it a shot. I mean, after everything we've been through, how much weirder can it get? Zyra's glow brightened, her reflective eyes shimmering with what Jake could only interpret as delight. I would be honored to share the ritual with you, Jake, but only when you are ready. Jake grinned. I think I'm getting there. As the station's normal operations resumed and the cleanup efforts began, Jake and Zyra walked side by side through the corridors, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced danger together, overcome their differences, and come to understand each other in ways neither had expected. For the first time, Jake felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, a connection that transcended species and culture. And as they moved forward, he realized that the greatest discoveries weren't in the stars or the machinery that kept the station running. They were in the people and the trust they built along the way. And maybe, just maybe, he was finally ready to embrace that.